lay the groundwork, be setting the stage. New rules, new power in the digital age. From the ground up, we building the hype. Blockchain, crypto, future in sight. We grind hard every day, no time to rest. Breaking chains, reclaiming what's ours, we blessed. From scholarships to ownership, making the shift. Athlete, entrepreneurs, our spirits lift. Dreams in binary, legacy and code. Rising from the streets for stories boldly unfold, yeah. New era, new game, no backboards in sight. Nil-nil athletes, we taking flight.
Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're diving into a really significant topic. It's kind of a hidden history within American sports. We're looking at quantifying the immense wealth that Black American athletes and communities didn't capture.
Right.
Specifically in the U.S. sports industry, say, from 1900 up to 2025. And why? Because of systemic exclusion, denial of ownership.
Yeah, it's a history that you often feel,
Yeah.
you know, but it's rarely been measured quite like this.
Exactly.
And this deep dive, it isn't just about like individual salaries. Important, yes, but we're talking cumulative economic impact.
Cumulative.
Yeah, being systematically shut out of ownership, real control, asset appreciation for well over a century.
Wow. And the source material for this, where's this coming from?
So it's based on this comprehensive report. It was commissioned by Mark Tee Armstrong.
Okay.
He's the founder of the No Backboard Basketball League, the NBBL.
Right, I've heard of that.
And it builds directly on William C. Rhoden's really groundbreaking book, $40 Million Slaves, definitely. So it takes that historical framework and adds this quantitative lens, trying to put numbers to it.
And how do they do that? Putting numbers to something so vast.
Well, interestingly, the report used an AI research assistant, GPT-4, I believe,
Okay.
to synthesize just enormous amounts of historical sports data, economic models, all that stuff.
So the mission was really to estimate the scale of this lost wealth across different sports, different eras.
Precisely. Our goal here is to kind of walk you through the key insights from that report.
Understand how they actually got to these figures.
Yeah, and make visible what's often been invisible, right? This wealth generated, yes, partly by Black talent, but then largely extracted away from Black communities.
Extracted. That's a key word.
It is. And just to give you a sense of the scale right up front, the report's overall estimate, it's staggering.
Okay.
We're talking hundreds of billions of dollars in missed wealth over the last 125 years.
Hundreds of billions. Okay. That definitely gets your attention. So how on earth did they quantify that? It seems incredibly complex, historically diffuse.
It is complex. And what's fascinating, I think, is the methodology. It seems to be the first known effort to do this kind of cross-sport inflation-adjusted economic analysis over such a long time frame.
Right.
They looked at both direct earnings, wages, salaries, and the indirect wealth accumulation.
Like ownership?
Exactly. Ownership equity, media rights, all the related business opportunities that spin off from sports.
And the core approach was sort of a comparison, wasn't it? Comparing reality to a hypothetical.
That's it, exactly. They modeled what, a reasonably equitable scenario might have looked like.
Okay.
So based on demographics, participation rates, things like that,
Yeah.
they figured that in a, let's say, fair industry, Black athletes, owners, coaches, entrepreneurs, maybe they should have captured around 45% of the total economic pie.
45%. A theoretical share.
A theoretical, equitable share, yeah. Then they calculated the difference between that 45% and what actually happened historically.
Which, for ownership and institutional wealth, was often pretty close to zero.
Often close to zero, yes.
Yeah.
Especially in the early decades and in terms of that structural wealth.
So the final number isn't just like lost paychecks. It's the value of businesses never built, assets never owned, and all the compound interest and reinvestment that just never happened within Black communities.
Precisely. And crucially, all the figures are presented in 2025 inflation-adjusted dollars.
Ah, okay.
So you can really grasp the magnitude, how that loss compounds over time.
Right. Okay, let's walk through some of the sports they looked at, because the history wasn't uniform, right? It played out differently. Horse racing. That's a surprising place to start.
It really is, yeah. Because back in the late 19th century, Black jockeys were totally dominant.
Dominant.
Oh, yeah. Think about the very first Kentucky Derby, 1875. 13 of the 15 jockeys were Black.
Wow, I didn't know that.
But then, as the sport got more professional, more lucrative, around the turn of the century, Black jockeys were systematically pushed out,
How?
often through intimidation, violence by white jockeys, owners. They were effectively erased from top-level racing for decades.
So you have this peak, early prominence, and then bam, total exclusion. Right when the sport is setting up its modern money-making structure.
Exactly. So how does the report quantify that loss?
Yeah.
Well, they estimate the total value generated by horse racing over this whole period was maybe $40–50 billion.
Okay.
After 1900, the Black American economic share of that, almost nothing.
Right.
So the missed wealth there, lost income, lost opportunity for jockeys, trainers, stable owners, shit out. They estimate it's on the order of $5–10 billion in today's money.
5 to 10 billion just from that early exclusion in horse racing.
Okay, boxing. Yeah. That's different, right? Black athletes broke through earlier, like Jack Johnson.
True, but still with significant barriers. The color line was very much enforced for key fights.
Like heavyweight champ Jack Dempsey famously avoided the black contender Harry Wills in the 1920s. The report points out that just that one decision potentially cost both fighters and the sport itself massive earnings. Would have been a historic fight.
But later on, black fighters did earn huge purses, right? Joe Louis, Ali, Mayweather.
Absolutely. That's a critical distinction the report makes. A significant chunk of boxing's total value, estimated around $100 billion, did flow directly to black athletes, especially from the mid-20th century on.
Okay, so where's the missed wealth then?
It highlights that black entrepreneurs were largely shut out of the promotional side, the business side.
Oh, okay.
The people owning the fights, the venues, the media rights, those real engines of wealth behind the athletes, overwhelmingly not black.
So the talent generating the buzz and the money was often black, sometimes very well paid. But the fundamental business ownership wasn't. What's the estimate there?
The missed wealth in boxing is estimated around $10 billion.
Okay.
That covers the lost purses from the color line era, sure. But a big piece is quantifying the promoter profits, the business equity, the asset appreciation that black entrepreneurs just couldn't access for most of that century.
Got it. Okay, now, baseball. This is where the numbers really start to jump and the history gets, well, stark.
Yeah, baseball was maybe the most rigidly segregated major sport for what, over 50 years? Until Jackie Robinson in 47?
Right, and during segregation, you had the Negro Leagues, a whole parallel black-owned sports economy.
Vibrant, yeah. Black athletes, organizers, entrepreneurs built that.
But the report points out something crucial here. Integration into MLB. Great social victory, obviously.
Huge.
But economically, devastating for black communities and entrepreneurs.
Devastating is the word. The Negro Leagues basically collapsed. And those black owners who'd built successful businesses, they weren't brought into MLB as owners or partners or anything like that.
They were just left behind while MLB took the talent.
Pretty much. And MLB's cumulative economic value over 125 years, estimated over $200 billion. Current team values alone are over $60 billion.
Wow.
Before 1947, black Americans' share in MLB wealth, zero. Even after integration, black players were generally only, 10–20% of rosters. And black ownership, significant executive presence, virtually non-existent, still largely true today.
So black individuals, black communities didn't really benefit from the massive growth in MLB franchise values. Didn't capture a meaningful share of the revenue, even when black players became huge stars.
The economic gap is just immense. The report estimates missed black wealth in baseball, roughly $80–100 billion.
80 to 100 billion.
Yeah, that includes decades of lost salaries for excluded players pre-integration. Crucially, it includes the loss of that entire black-owned Negro Leagues ecosystem.
Right.
And the complete absence of black ownership in a league whose modern success was built significantly on the talent pool developed during segregation.
That's a massive number. Okay, let's shift to basketball, the NBA. A sport where black players really came to dominate on the court. It's about 75% black players today, right?
Yeah, on the court, absolutely. And on the surface, it looks like, a success story, black athletes earning enormous contracts.
Seems like it.
But Rhoden's analysis, which this report puts numbers to, argues that while black players capture a large share of player salaries, they've been largely excluded from the real wealth engines of the league, ownership. Control.
Right. So billions flowing to the players and salary, sure. But the actual multi-billion-dollar value of the teams themselves, the appreciating assets, held by others.
Overwhelmingly held by others. The NBA's total estimated value is maybe $150–200 billion.
Okay.
Players today get about 50% of league revenue, right, through the CBA.
Yeah.
And black players capture a big slice of that wage pool, maybe close to that theoretical 45% just for direct pay. But the glaring gap, as the report hammers home, is ownership. Until very recently, Michael Jordan was the only black majority owner of a major U.S. sports franchise.
Yeah.
And he just sold his stake.
So how does the report quantify that impact? The near total lack of ownership in a league built so heavily on black talent and culture.
They estimate missed black wealth in basketball at around $40 billion.
$40 billion?
Yeah, and that figure primarily reflects that almost non-existent black ownership stake, while franchise values have just exploded into the billions, fueled in large part by black athletic performance and cultural influence.
Okay, football. The NFL, richest league in the U.S. now. Similar story. Segregation, then black dominance on the field.
Very similar trajectory. The NFL had an unofficial but very real ban on black players from 33 to 46 today. Around 70% of NFL players are black.
70%.
Yeah.
And yet, the report points this out starkly. The NFL currently has 0 black majority team on it.
Zero.
It's
a statistic that just cuts right to the core of this value extraction argument. The NFL's cumulative revenue over the century, estimated $400 billion. Current franchise values, well over $100 billion combined.
astronomical numbers.
And black athletes capture a significant portion of player salaries historically, maybe around a third of total league revenue going to players.
Yeah.
But they, and black communities by extension, have basically 0% of the ownership equity, 0% of those appreciating multi-billion-dollar assets.
This is really where that plantation model metaphor from Rhoden feels most direct. Primarily black labor generating wealth that accrues almost entirely to others, the owners.
It's hard to ignore the parallel. The missed wealth estimate in football, roughly $100 billion.
Another huge one, $100 billion.
Yeah. Capturing lost player value from older discriminatory systems, definitely. But critically quantifying the entire appreciation of team franchise values that black stakeholders were just systematically shut out from.
Okay, let's touch on individual sports too. Golf, tennis. Clear histories of exclusion there as well.
Absolutely. Explicit exclusion. Golf's PGA Tour had a Caucasian-only clause in its constitution until 1961.
61. Wow.
Yeah. Effectively shut out talented black golfers for decades from the main circuit, the main prize money. Tennis, also segregated, made it incredibly difficult for pioneers like Althea Gibson to even access major tournaments until later in her career.
And even track and field. Jesse Owens, Olympic hero.
Famous story, right?
Yeah.
Won 4 gold medals, came home a hero, and had to race horses for money.
Racehorses?
Because the endorsement deals, the real economic opportunities, just weren't there for a black man at that time, even an Olympic champion.
So breaking barriers on the field or the track or the court didn't automatically mean capturing the economic value. The structures were still exclusionary.
Exactly. What is the report estimate was missed here in these individual sports?
Yeah.
Well, cumulative prize money, endorsements in golf and tennis, tens of billions. For most of that history, black players got just a tiny slice. Until transformative figures like Tiger Woods or Venus and Serena Williams came along much later. So missed wealth estimates are around $5–10 billion for golf, maybe $2–5 billion for tennis. That's lost earnings, lack of black-owned businesses in those industries. Track and field, maybe $1–2 billion from lost endorsements, leadership roles.
Okay. Now, college sports. This feels like another huge area of value extraction.
Oh, absolutely. Enormous value generated, often by black athletes, with virtually no direct compensation to them for decades. The whole system of amateurism.
Right. College football, basketball programs, especially PWIs, predominantly white institutions, they became multi-billion-dollar industries, built significantly on unpaid black labor, especially after integration picked up in the 60s and 70s.
You see coaches making multi-million-dollar salaries, universities building these incredible facilities, conferences signing billion-dollar TV deals.
All powered by athletes who historically got maybe a scholarship, maybe, and were barred from making money off their own name, image, likeness.
The report cites studies estimating black athletes in top conferences lost something like $1.2 to $1.4 billion per year. Between 2005 and 2019 alone, just because of those amateurism rules. That's a staggering transfer of wealth away from the labor towards the institutions, the administrators.
And you compound that over decades, the figure must be immense.
It is. The report estimates missed black wealth in college sports at roughly $50 billion,
$50 billion.
covering decades of essentially unpaid labor, plus the opportunity cost of all those commercial rights denied to the athletes themselves.
And one more piece here. The HBCU sports ecosystem, a particularly kind of poignant story of economic impact related to integration.
Yeah, because HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, they developed really robust, culturally vital sports programs during segregation.
Had to, right?
Right.
Black athletes often had nowhere else to go for college and competitive sports.
Right, they were the incubators.
They were. But when the predominantly white colleges integrated, they started aggressively recruiting the top black talent away from HBCUs.
Often without any kind of reciprocity or acknowledgement of the development work the HBCUs had done. Exactly. So the HBCUs missed out on the massive revenue explosion from national TV deals, big conference affiliations, major bowl games. All that money disproportionately went to the PWIs and their conferences, which now featured those same black stars developed at HBCUs.
So it drained resources and potential revenue from black institutions.
It did. The report estimates missed institutional wealth and lost revenue for HBCU sports programs is around $40–60 billion over this period.
40 to 60 billion. Money that could have built stronger athletic programs, sure, but also academic resources, endowments within black communities. A different kind of generational wealth.
A totally different potential trajectory.
Okay, so bringing all these pieces together, horse racing exclusion, boxing ownership denial, the Negro Leagues collapse, and MLB exclusion, the NBA NFL ownership gap despite player dominance, individual sports barriers, college amateurism extraction, the drain from HBCUs. What's the grand total?
The report estimates,
Yeah.
aggregating all these analyses, that on the order of $300 billion to $350 billion in 2025, inflation-adjusted U.S. dollars represents wealth that was not captured by black American athletes and communities between 1900 and 2025, all due to these systemic patterns of exclusion and denial of ownership.
$300 to $350 billion, that's the headline figure. It really does make visible this massive invisible extraction. Wealth not earned, not owned as equity, not reinvested, not allowed to compound within black communities for over a century.
And this figure, it gives real quantitative weight to the metaphor in Rhoden's book, right? The $40 million slaves. It highlights how the immense value, the wealth generated by the talent and labor of black athletes so often just flowed away to those who owned and controlled the systems, not the creators of the value.
It's a powerful, sobering quantification of a historical injustice. And, while there has been some progress, you mentioned name, image, likeness deals for college athletes finally allowing some compensation.
And some progress.
And there are some, limited efforts to include black investors in ownership groups.
The report definitely notes that the fundamental disparity remains vast. I mean, 0 black majority owners in the NFL with 70% black players. That says a lot.
Yeah.
Michael Jordan was the only recent one in any major league, and he sold his team. The core problem, ownership and control, it really persists.
So given that scale, that historical loss, hundreds of billions, the report argues that just tweaking things isn't enough?
Exactly. It argues that tweaking existing structures won't cut it. It looks beyond the traditional models entirely, towards potentially new approaches for the future.
It doesn't just dwell on the past loss, then. It pivots.
Yes, absolutely pivots to the future.
Yeah.
It presents specific tools, concepts, things it believes could actually reverse this pattern, build a new, truly equitable sports economy where the value creators actually capture the wealth.
Okay, so how does the source see things like blockchain, Bitcoin, combined with new platforms like the No Backboard Basketball League you mentioned? How do they see these as instruments for change?
Well, it views blockchain tech as a potential foundation for decentralized ownership and control.
How so?
By securing digital ownership records on a distributed ledger, something that can't be easily controlled or changed by a central authority, the idea is that athletes, communities, fans could gain direct control over their own likeness, their content, fan interactions, maybe even contract rights.
Bypassing the traditional gatekeepers, the leagues, the teams.
Potentially bypassing those centralized structures that historically controlled and, yes, extracted that value.
And the No Backboard Basketball League, NBBL, how does that fit in?
NBBL is presented in the report as kind of a working model of a new system, built differently from the ground up, with ownership and programmable rules right at the core.
Okay.
So by creating its own league structure, its own media distribution, maybe integrating things like a token economy, the report sees it as a way to build a self-contained cultural and commercial platform.
Where the value stays inside.
Where the value generated within that system is owned and controlled by the participants themselves, the athletes, the fans, the members of that ecosystem, instead of flowing outward to traditional external owners.
And Bitcoin. What's its role in this vision as a reserve?
Yeah, as the report describes it, integrating something like a Bitcoin-backed treasury into these new leagues, like NBBL, it provides a decentralized, censorship-resistant store of value.
Okay, why is that important?
It's seen as a way to build long-term, community-controlled capital within the sports ecosystem itself, fundamentally shifting the model, right, from one that drains black labor and talent for external profit to one that actually generates and stores capital internally for the benefit of the community that drives its value.
It's definitely an ambitious vision, rooted clearly in understanding the sheer economic weight of that historical exclusion.
It is. And the report really argues that by understanding that $350 billion figure, that loss over 125 years, you see the urgent need for fundamentally different systems that might finally ensure the people who are the source of the value actually capture and control it.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you, the listener, thinking about this? What does it truly mean for athletes, for communities, to achieve what the report calls cultural sovereignty and real economic control in sports?
Yeah.
How does understanding this massive historical loss inform how we might build future systems where wealth and power are maybe built and maintained differently?
It really raises a profound question, doesn't it, about how value is created, captured, distributed, not just in sports, but really in any industry driven by talent and cultural influence. And maybe the biggest question is, can these new technologies, these new ways of organizing finally ensure that the talent, the culture that creates such immense value actually leads to equitable ownership and real lasting prosperity for the communities behind it all?
Elevate, dominate, I set the stage, and with every shot I drop, I turn the page. Basketball lyricist, I'm cashing all bets. Sweat dripping, heartbeat skip, it's time to ball. Under city lights, stand tall, won't stall. Defenders try to close, but I'm in another league. Shoot the tray with ease, it's the creed, I believe. Smooth operator, on court navigator. In this concrete jungle, I'm the prime gladiator. I'm moving quick on the hardwood, it's understood. No backboard, still I score like a player should. Nothing but net, rhythm set by the bounce sound. 3 and D, my mantra, yeah, I lock down. Handle slick, watch me get in my bag fast. Rock the rock, pass the pass, make the play last. Ball movement, sublime is pure grace. Wins the mission, only victory I chase. In this game, I maintain that boom bap feel. Conscious flow from the go, it's the real deal. I spin the sphere, no fear, got the court vision. Dribble drive like art, cutting up with precision. Bounce to the beat, the streets my composition. 3 and D, my decree is tradition. No class, just class when I'm shooting. Switch sounds like a track, get the crowd rooting. Winning's the goal, deep in my soul, standing tall. Who dreams manifest, I won't fall with every jumper. Lay up my legacy, I build on the asphalt stage where my spirit's thrilled.